The senator from New Hampshire.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today I come to the Senate floor to talk about an issue that I've worked on for a number of years and something I feel very strongly about, and that is our detention and interrogation policy. And since this administration has gotten into office based on a campaign promise, the president has sought to close Guantanamo. And this administration has continued to release individuals held at Guantanamo, dangerous terrorists with backgrounds, whether it's involvement with al-Qaeda or involvement with the Taliban or other groups. And just recently, they have released another 11 individuals from Guantanamo. And one of the issues that has troubled me most about this is that it's really important, I think, that the American people know what's going on, but so much of this is happening in the cloak of darkness, and so much of it is an unwillingness of this administration to level with the American people about the terrorist affiliations and activities of current and former Guantanamo detainees. And we've seen the most recent example of that, which is troubling. On March 23rd of 2016, Paul Lewis, the special envoy for Guantanamo detention closure, testified before the House Foreign Affairs Committee that there have been Americans that have died because of Guantanamo detainees. And he was asked about this in this House hearing, and my assumption is one of the reasons he was asked about it is because 30% of those who were held at Guantanamo, terrorists who have been released from Guantanamo, are suspected or confirmed of re-engaging in terrorism. So apparently, Mr. Lewis was asked, and he said there have been Americans who have died because of Guantanamo detainees who have been released. And so a fair question is, a very important question is to understand what have these former detainees done in terms of attacking Americans or our NATO allies who have worked with us to fight terrorists in places around the world. And so that was a question that I've posed to this administration. I asked, based on what Mr. Lewis, who is the special envoy for Guantanamo detention closure, said, I asked the administration for information about those who have been killed by Guantanamo detainees. And on May 23rd, the administration responded to me, but their answers to my questions were classified in such a way that even my staff with a top secret security clearance could not review the response. I was able to review the response. Mr. President, what I want to be able to do is to give information to the American people so that they can understand the response, because this administration continues to push to close Guantanamo. They continue to release terrorists from Guantanamo to countries around the world, and they continue to refuse to tell the American people, hiding behind classification, who the people that are being released in terms of their backgrounds, of their terrorist affiliations. They've been releasing a name and the country they're transferred to, but no information to the American people about the terrorist backgrounds of these individuals, no information to the American people about how these individuals that are being released, what have they been engaged in? Have they been engaged in prior attacks on Americans or our allies? And I believe the American people have the right to know. So I also wrote a follow-up letter to the president on Tuesday, urging him to provide an unclassified response without delay to understand how many Americans and our NATO partners have been killed by former Guantanamo detainees, and which former detainees committed these terrorist attacks so that we can understand what we're facing. And unfortunately, we don't know. But today in the Washington Post, there was an article that reported 12 former Guantanamo detainees were involved in attacks on Americans after their release. And the estimate in the Washington Post report says that these detainees have killed about a half dozen Americans. Why should the American people have to rely on the ability of the Washington Post to talk to people off the record to try to find out exactly what are the activities of these terrorists, which the administration continues to release without full information to the American people? And I appreciate the reporting of the Washington Post, but I believe the American people deserve an answer directly from this administration. Because again, since Mr. Lewis testified that Guantanamo detainees have been involved in killing Americans, the administration has released 11 more detainees from Guantanamo, with more than 24 likely to be released in the coming months. And again, 30% are suspected or confirmed from re-engaging in terrorism. People like Ibrahim al-Kozi, affiliated with al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, released by this administration in 2012 to Sudan. He has joined back up with al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is headquartered in Yemen. And previously, what has been revealed about him publicly is he trained at a notorious al-Qaeda camp, member of bin Laden's elite security detail. And what's more troubling is he's now back with al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. He's a leader, he's a spokesman for this group, and he is urging attacks on Americans and our allies. So that is what's at stake when we think about the security of the American people. And yet the administration, this president, keeps pushing to close Guantanamo and is trying to take de facto steps to close Guantanamo by releasing people without information to the American people. So I have in this bill, Mr. President, in the defense authorization that is pending on this floor, I have in committee, in the Armed Services Committee, included a provision that would prohibit the international release or transfer of any detainee from Guantanamo until the Department of Defense submits to Congress an unclassified report on the individual's previous terrorist activities and affiliations, as well as their support or participation in attacks against the U.S. or our allies. The administration keeps claiming that it's in the best interests of the United States, our national security interest, to close Guantanamo. I fully disagree with that argument. But if that's what they really believe, why have they not told the American people when they release the terrorists that are held at Guantanamo who these people have been involved with and whether or not they have been involved with attacks on Americans or our allies? Instead, the name and the country they're going to. That's all they're telling the American people. And if it's in our national security interest, they will fully tell the American people why they believe transferring and releasing these terrorists to third-party countries. They will tell the American people the truth about who's being released and what they've been involved in. And I think that the American people, should they know that information, will, I hope, side with my view of this, which is that to close Guantanamo, especially by releasing dangerous individuals who are there, with 30% of them suspected or confirmed of getting back in the battle, is against our national security interests and makes us less safe. So, Mr. President, I would ask, no matter where you in this body stand on the closure of Guantanamo, don't we owe it to the American people to tell them? Doesn't the administration owe it to the American people when they are releasing individuals from Guantanamo? What terrorist group is this person affiliated with? Has this person ever been involved with the attack of Americans or our allies? Don't the American people deserve the basic information? The American people need to know who's being released, why they're dangerous, and what is happening in terms of our national security interests, because I believe that they are being undermined greatly by continuing to release terrorists who get back in the fight. The last thing that our men and women in uniform should see, or any of our allies, is a terrorist that we previously had captured at Guantanamo. So I hope, Mr. President, that the administration will live up to its transparency policy that the president claimed when he ran for office. Because when it comes to releasing dangerous detainees from Guantanamo, some of whom have gotten back in the fight, 30% suspected or confirmed of getting back in the fight of terrorism against us, the American people deserve information about what is happening and what danger these individuals pose to us and our allies. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.